We see 2 weeks ago, in the aftermath of the explosion that rocked Larry Trask's mountainside base and the remains of the Sentinels destroyed in the X-Men's attack. However, one of the machines is still active and very slowly begins to piece itself together, repairing itself back to normal with the parts of its brethren. Fast forward 2 weeks to Illinois, and we see that same Sentinel, fully operational and holding Ashley with Xavier and Hank incapacitated. She yells for it to put her down as she helped hide it to repair itself, and it complies. To Xavier's shock, it does so while noting that it also listened when she told her to put them down as he climbs back to his wheelchair. Believing she might be controlling the robot, Ashley asks if he's okay. Swapping to the ship at sea, Scott, Jean, and Candy find Avia pinned up on the wall. Climbing on some crates, Cyclops finds that she's still alive and quickly unpins her, asking Jean to help lower her, which she easily does. They find Avia is in bad shape though and choose to take her to the ship to medically treat her, though they'll have to fight through their attackers as he blasts through the doorway. The people outside are unable to enter as they wonder where Kruger is. He appears behind them all with Cyclops' blast dissipating before him. He casually walks into the room as Scott is shocked that his beam is doing nothing. He knows of the X-Men and has been following them since their appearance at Cape Citadel. He then compares himself to Xavier in that he's been gathering the different as well, but doesn't fear calling themselves freaks. Back at the Savage Land, Amphibious is monitoring a house with two people and believing them not to be dangerous and wanting to help Magneto, begins returning to the cave he's hidden in. Arriving, he finds him awake and almost fully recovered due to the gases from the city, as he comments that even his powers are coming back as he lifts a boulder. Returning to Illinois, Ashley tells the professor that the robot simply arrived, which he finds fascinating since it didn't attack her as Hank awakens and immediately attacks the machine again, dodging a punch determined not to be knocked out again. Knowing he can't win, he's determined to slow it down when Charles tells him to stop as Ashley tells the Sentinel the same thing. Seeing that the Sentinel stopped attacking, Hank asks Xavier what's going on as they hear Ashley's mother return home wanting to know the same thing. She sees her daughter is okay as the Sentinel identifies her as the mother and normal. Mrs. Martin demands to know who the two men are and about the machine, which Ashley calls Big Bot as Charles offers to explain. Cyclops demands to know where Angel is, but Kruger dismisses the question, merely saying he's safe, as Candy scoffs at that due to Avia's condition. Turning, he addresses her as Marvel Girl, saying she brought it on herself as Jean realizes that it's because Candy is wearing her old costume. She starts to correct him, but Scott stops her as Jean hopes she catches his hint of calling her by the codename, and Jean wants to keep the advantage of surprise. Kruger then dismisses her when Scott wants to know how he deflected his attack if he's not a mutant. Raising his hands, he tells them that they rejected the polite term of mutant as the trio begins slowly falling and eventually passing out. He admits to being a mutant himself as one of the underlings inform him that some people he's been waiting on are ready to talk on the radio as Kruger thinks of his ability to suppress a mutant's power, knocking them out. Heading to the radio room, he takes the receiver and asks if they can hear him, which the other affirms and asks what he's got for them. He tells them that he has more of the X-Men for him if he wants them, and we see Blob agree to take them as Unus and Mastermind lounge behind him. Ashley's mother learns of her daughter being a mutant as Charles tells her they don't normally inform the parent about it until later, but the Sentinel changed things. Mrs. Martin has heard of the robots and wonders how they found her daughter. Unsure, Xavier asks Ashley to see if the robot will tell them, and she tries. It complies and tells of how it repaired itself over several days, and how it left the base and headed west when it detected a mutant presence. Landing, it found Ashley but wasn't repaired enough to kill her. Shocked at her daughter for hiding it in the barn, Charles realizes that the Sentinel scans were scrambling their own when her mother asks what they're going to do if it's programmed to destroy all mutants when it picks up on those 3 words. Hank barely saves the family as the robot attacks and asks the professor what to do when Ashley runs from him. She yells for it to stop, but it refuses when she tries again, saying it was her friend and that it doesn't have to follow its programming. It registers that the programming could be cancelled in the right conditions and checks to see if Ashley is able to countermand its orders. Finding she can't, it attacks again with Hank saving her. Crashing through the house after them, it continues following its orders to destroy mutants. Tearing herself free of Hank again, Ashley has enough of the Sentinel, yelling she doesn't want to be its friend anymore when it finds it can't move. Saying no one can play with it, it finds its weapons offline as she yells that even the other robots that helped repair it should all hate each other as the Sentinel begins ripping its chest open. Yelling that she hates Big Bot, to the horror of the others, they watch as the giant machine explodes into pieces. Her mother calls to her as Xavier warns her to be careful as she calls her daughter's name again. Saying she heard her the first time, she turns around, her eyes red as she tells them not to make her even madder. We then return to the Savage Land where we see Bobby stumbling around the forest with smoke behind him, feeling helpless when he finds Lycos, but sees he's in bad shape when he yells at Drake to stay back. Wanting to know how he knows his name when he has amnesia, he steps closer when Carl grabs him and begins siphoning energy from the youngster, unable to stop himself. Finding himself transforming again, he sees he shouldn't have to run and hide as he once again becomes Sauron and believes himself to be able to deal with the invader of the island.